place in Detroit, and I said, we need some help in getting some people to our mass meeting and some publicity, and Diane was already in the news, national news. I said, if we could just get her out of jail and get her up here, okay? Now, I was very, strategic in that. And that's the other point that I want to make, finally. Even though Diane had committed herself to go to jail, there are times when you have to make some compromises and not just think about yourself, but think about the best role that you can play. Maybe not the one that you want to or the one that's most glamorous, but the best decision you can make for the good of the whole. And that's it. Bevel went off, he's not here, didn't make it. He's stuck in a snowstorm, between here and Knoxville. But we had a hunger strike in jail. And Rip, remember this, Rip Patton, those are folks who were in jail with us and some others. And he went off the hunger strike. We said, Bevel, how you gonna go off the hunger strike? We made a commitment to stay on this hunger strike, and you're talking about you gonna eat in the morning. He said, I don't care what y'all do, I'm gonna eat in the morning. And I always used to hang around with him, try to keep him alive as long as I could. I did a good job. He's still living, So what he did was this. He found out that one of the guys from Tennessee State, you remember who he was, had an ulcer. He was suffering. What's his name? Bill. Yeah. Yeah, your brother, Bill. Yeah. Bevel said.
Little?
No.
Bill Bennett?
Bill Harper.
Bill Harper.
Oh, Bill Harper.
Bill Harper was walking around with a hole in his stomach, while the rest of us on the hunger strike, he was suffering more than anybody else. And Bevel said, no, I'm going to eat. Because he didn't want this guy to have to, break the hunger strike. So Bevel took the leadership. That's the lesson. You have to take the leadership and make hard decisions, not for yourself.
I have a message here. We have all been looking at that empty chair. Jim Bevel called. There is snow between here and Knoxville, and he is in it. He will be here tonight, and will still be speaking at Olivet Baptist Church, 1811 Charlotte. Now, I hate to say to the two people who raised their hands, and I recognize that if I let you ask questions, we're going to miss Jim Bevel's sermon tonight. We have run out of time, so with apologies to both of you, we're going to have Guy and Candy Carowan sing for us when we're through, but you can't go through this afternoon listening to you explain to us what it took to help this city and this society change itself without wondering where we are today and where we're going. And so I'd like to conclude by asking each of you to think of the journey we made, recognizing that progress has been made, but understanding that there still are obstacles and still are barriers, that hatred lives, that discrimination endures, and that we have not yet overcome.
John, could I just say one or two words? And I maybe because I'm a member of Congress and older, grayer.
Tell me about it, John. Tell me about it.
Maybe some people call me a little more conservative or something like that, but I don't think so. I think I'm the same person. I don't think I've changed that much since those early days in 1960. Even in the House, sometimes I stand up on the floor with my colleagues in a caucus meeting and talk about building pockets of the beloved community, laying down the burden of race, creating this sense of one family, one community. one house. And sometimes when I travel, I hear young people saying nothing has changed. And I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes.
Yeah.
And I will show you we live in a different world. When I was growing up here in the American South, there was a tremendous amount of fear. The fear is gone. And you heard me say I wanted to go to Troy State. I didn't go to Troy State. I went to school at American Baptist here in Nashville and to Fisk. But after I got elected to Congress, outside of the little town of Troy, a little place called Branger, about 12 miles from Troy, had John Lewis Day. And Troy State University band led the parade. And the chancellor, who was a good friend of Governor Wallace, came up to me and said, Congressman Lewis, we heard years ago you wanted to attend Troy State. So will you come back and let us give you an honorary degree? So I went back to Troy State, and I've gone back many times since, but they gave me an honorary degree. And I tell those students, I got my degree from Troy State the easy way. In 1956, when I was very, very young, only 16 years old, with some of my brothers and sisters and first cousins, we went down to the public library, trying to check out books, trying to get a library card. And the librarian said, the library is for whites only, not for color. But I went back to that public library on July 5th, 1998, for a book signing of my book, Walking with the Wind. And hundreds of black and white citizens showed up, and they gave me a library card. I said, we've come a distance. Here in Nashville and other parts of the South, in this part of America, it's been what I like to call a nonviolent revolution. A revolution of values, a revolution of ideas. We're not there yet.
No, that's right.
We have not created the beloved community.
Yeah, that's right.
But I tell you one thing, we own our way. There
come
may
a
be some
distance,
interruptions,
yeah.
there may be some delays. The scars and stains of racism may be still embedded in the very veins of our society. But we own our way. And I'm convinced there's so much hope, there's so much optimism, we're going to build it. And Jim said something today at church. And I have this feeling, I really do, that we are on the verge of something in America. There's something happening out there. You get out and travel around the country, something is seething. People prepared, they're ready to get in the way. They're ready to get in trouble. That's good. That's why we have to tell this story over and over again to inspire our unborn generation and the generation of young people today. And some of us not so young need to be inspired again.
CT, would you like to give us your view?
I'm trying to deal with the question that you're talking about. What do we do now?
Where are we today? And
That is the question.
And the thing is that I'm after practical ideas to make things work. I always start with something far beyond that, right? For instance, I believe if you love, you liberate. If you don't, you're involved in people's oppression, all right? That sounds up here. But at the same time, there is a double focus now. It's not only on what white people do or don't, it's on what black people do as well. And that a central problem that we have that the average person can deal with is the fact that we have.
You made it. I told you. I knew you would make it.
Oh, no.
I'm glad you got here, Jim.
You gotta stop meeting like this. I had just announced you were gonna preach tonight. And we were about to adjourn so we could get there in time to hear you, but you're here, so we can stay. But
is that the point being is, I know that we will overcome. I know that we'll create the
A better community,
a better community, if not the, in fact, beloved community, all right? I know that. I take all that for granted. That's a part of my nervous system, all right? That's part of why I continue to struggle. There isn't anything here that I want, right? Short of those things. So I don't, so I'm always thinking about how do we get there? That's the thing I think about. And now this is not going to be liked by some people, and it's going to be loved by others, right? Is that I know that if we're going to have the beloved community, we must convert white people as well as black people, all right? And I'm balancing that thing out, right? Is that I also know that if black people and poor people in this country don't get have economic stability, it's not going to happen because the rich and the powerful are going to run over them. All right? All right? And so what I'm concerned about is that I've been dealing with cooperative economics. Right? We started a bank with it. I know that during the various ways you do it, that I'm not looking for millionaires anymore, I'm looking for thousandaires. Right? Right? And the same energy that we use in organizing people, we can organize to do anything we want economically if we will do it. That's a difficult task, all right? Now, the other part of that is America must realize that the deprivation of black people comes because of what they did, right? And what they continue to do, what they wrote in laws, what they have in their customs and traditions. That we didn't make ourselves poor, we've been made poor, all right? All right? Is that, and until they realize that, the dialogue is always going to be what's wrong with you black people, huh? When the issue is not what's wrong with us, but what's wrong with white people, that they continue to deal with racism over the years. How do we clear that out, right? So that we together create something good. If we can have a Marshall Plan for all of Europe and for Germany, who is our enemy, right, is that there has to be a Marshall Plan in this country or something that goes with it. You don't have to be a I'm thinking about all the time, every day, every hour. How do we create the new thing? It can't be done without legislation, but if the legislators don't even understand people, right? And they don't even understand how you get poor. They don't even understand how you were made poor, all right? All right? Black or white, right? And if they only want, Amos has a line in 3:10. He said they don't know how to do right. Those who bring violence and money into their strongholds, right? Until, in fact, we elect people in this country to political office, right, who care about and love people. It's not going to happen. We have to really be clear, right? Is that this whole idea of maximum profit is the most destructive thing in American life, huh? And that we've got to change that in our mindset. And when we can, the dialogue changes. And we have an understanding of how we then can cause each other to care for each other enough that there can be a beloved community. Right? And it's not going to happen without being pushed to it. I am clear on that. Is that they're not going to do it because they are loving and likable, as much as we've got to be pushed into it. We have pulled this, black America, in 2 centuries have pulled this country into 2 centuries by their thumbs, all right? Yelling and hollering and complaining, right? Now they say we're the complainers. We got something to complain about, huh? But the point being is that do we have to pull them into another century? I'm not for certain that we can be there. I want us to see that Martin King was the prophet of our age, and that if we're not willing to follow those guidelines, America will never achieve what it could be. And if it doesn't do it in the next 50 to 75 to 100 years, the rest of the world is going to walk over us. Huh? Not in war. They won't have to. We'll fall apart. All right? Now, those are my worries. My worries are, all right, is that are we ever going to be Christian enough for anybody to believe that we are? My other worry is what will the white majority do when they're no longer the majority but another minority? Will they want democracy then? Huh? Will they want Christianity when the church is really integrated? Huh? In fact, do they have a value system? Do we have a value system in this country that in fact we will stand by under a different set of circumstances? Those are the questions that bother me intensely, right? But I also know that we don't solve them by talking about them. What the movement taught me, that it's in the action that you find out who you are. It's in the action you find out what the nation's about. It's in the action that you change things. And that solutions come serendipity up out of the action. They don't just come because you keep on doing the same old things. Because if you keep on doing the same old things, you're going to get what you got.
Okay.
Jim, you have the mic. It's on.
I would like to respond to that question, tell me what we do. I want to thank Lawson and Vivian. You know, they used to be John and my teachers, and they're northern fellas, and they speak good English, and John and I are from the country, and we speak poor English. And so they was teaching us to pray. And so, you know, you ask God for a clean heart.
Excuse me, Jim, can you hear?
Yeah, they can hear me.
Sure.
And so John and I was learning to pray from these guys, and we asked him for a clean heart, but our language is so bad, he thought we said a clean head. And so...
I'll leave John. Jim said, leave John alone.
Why don't you try taking off your hat?
That's what I said. They gave us a clean head because we didn't have a prayer right.
Another point to you.
All right.
You know, I truly believe in the philosophy, the discipline of nonviolence.
Yes, yes.
You don't want me to lay it down on this stage.
My usual role.
I want to, please excuse me, we got caught in a snowstorm coming in from Knoxville. But let me just say this to all of you. Nashville was like, what God really did, we was in his classroom in the 60s, and we're now just getting ready to do work because we have learned the science. Nonviolence is the science of government. And how it works is very simple. It works like I will not violate the dignity of another. I will not compromise my dignity. When I make a decision, it will be in the interest of everyone. And when I take an action, it will be in the interest of everyone. And when you take that position, no one can stop you from what you're doing, particularly if it's right, just, and needed. So we learn that. So nonviolence is the science of government. Now we had to learn another lesson, which is the science of marriage. Because if you go to Matthew 5:21 and 22, it says, and you have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not kill, and whoever kills shall be liable to the judgment. But I say to you, don't hate, don't insult, don't injure people. Well, that's a high standard. And then the next lesson Jesus teaches, he said, and if you look at a woman in lust, you are outside the law, which means then you got to have nonviolence inside and outside. So you can't act out of hate and lust, because if you act out of hate, you break down government and government infrastructure, and if you act out of lust, you break down marriage and marriage infrastructure. Okay, so now what we can do, based on what we learn, we can now put families together and governments together, because governments actually grow out of families. So that's what we're doing now. And so in about 10 years, we'll have America cleaned up, and we'll have in the precincts scientific governments, so that all of the people have the constitutional infrastructure to engage in a constant process of development. The only thing that America should be really transporting and to the rest of the world is the American Revolution. And we really do have a good product, the American Revolution. And one of the things that King and Lincoln understood was this that everybody else missed. Lincoln really did understand you can't save America if you don't save African people. And King understood that you can't save African people if you don't save America. So there's very few people who love God, the nation, and all the people. See, that's the secret. That's your gross national product, right? God, the nation, and the people. So if you don't love God, and you don't love America, and you don't love all the American people, you can't help.
That's right.
See, you got to love God, and you got to love America, and you got to love all the people. Because I was talking to some black guys the other day who was mad with white people. I said, listen, man, no father could leave a son a gift equal to the gift that our fathers left us. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by that creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these righteous life living in the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments instituted among men. And any time when government infringe upon these principles, it is your duty, it is your
vote
to abolish it or to alter it. Now, what father could leave you a better gift than that? So what we have to do is simply go back and do our studies on nonviolence and apply them to the present problems. We had 3 in the 60s, segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement. We have 4 major problems that we have to address now. Murder has to be addressed. Citizens, the state, and the nation can't murder people. That's unlawful because government's instituted to stop that. So then we have to go deep enough to have government that stops that. Then we can't have miseducation of children. There's no point in, there's no reason to graduate a child from high school that does not know how to run their church, their government, their business, their clinic, home, and school, and can research, produce, and market agricultural and industrial products. You've got to graduate from high school people who are scientists and citizens. Okay, so we have to solve those problems, and I'm just happy that the Lord has kept us alive long enough to be able to do that. And I simply ask all of you here this: get back into the American Revolution. Rosa Parks brought it to another level. She did with love and peace and patience what Lincoln couldn't do with his armies. You cannot liberate people with violence. You cannot liberate people with murder. You have to do it with love and truth. So I simply challenge all of you to get back into the American Revolution. I'm going to be over to church preaching tonight and going to lay out how we're going to do that. It takes a little longer than I got here now. I'll be preaching over that. But we're in the move. We're on the move. And as we move segregation and discrimination and disenfranchisement, we will move murder, miseducation, economic exploitation, and brokenness in family life. That's what we got to do. And it's in this nonviolent process. And I just thank God for Lawson and Vivian and Myers Horton and Martin King and the people who taught us, and Mahatma Gandhi, Jesus, and Tolstoy, who taught us, no, the kingdom of God will be established. And America is the foundation for that. And I just pray that all you guys take being Americans very serious. That's your problem. You don't take being an American serious. That's the most serious thing on planet, the American citizen. And our Constitution gives us all the authority. It's not in the Congress, it's not in the president, it's not in the courts, it's in the people. And so I challenge all of you to come to church tonight, and then let's get involved in the American Revolution. God bless you and God keep you.
Bernard? Yeah, Diane?
Yes. Mine is very simple. I'm sorry, did you say?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine is very
I'll be
simple.
next.
Diane?
She's the chair. She's the chair.
Yeah, Diane.
Why don't you yield to Diane?
Oh, that's what I'm doing.
I have a mic.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
You have a mic.
Good.
Well, we've all got mics, and Bernard has 2. But go ahead, Diane, and then we'll go to Bernard and then to Jim.
Okay. In addressing the question about where we are today, I agree with John and Jim that we have definitely come a distance since the 60s. But several things worry me about today. When so many Americans put more value on the life of an American than they do on the life of someone from Afghanistan or someone from Iraq. That's the new racism. That's the same thing as putting more value on the life of a white person than on the life of a black person. So, although we've come a distance, we've got proof positive that racism is alive and well in the United States. I'm also concerned because if we continue to just increase security rather than addressing the causes of problems, there is nowhere for this country to go but into a police state.
That's where it is.
It's the only possibility. And over a period of the last 30, 35 years, I've just seen us increase security, but not attempt to address the causes why we need to look out for our security. And then I think I agree with Bevel about the responsibility of citizenship. And in a democracy, people are the rulers, and I don't think that most American citizens see themselves as the rulers of this country. We have to start doing that. I think the government of the people, by the people, and for the people has indeed perished from the earth. I think now we have government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. I think American citizens have to wake up and assert ourselves and regain our positions as rulers of the country. I think the civil rights movement, the nonviolent movement of the 1960s, showed the country how to solve problems.
That's it.
I think that blowing apart the bodies of people's babies by bombing them and what have you, is not the way to solve problems. I was appalled when Bush, I don't call him president because he stole that election. Yeah. I was appalled when he said, we're not interested in talking or solutions, we're going to go and attack. I think that can only make the world more dangerous. And once again, I think we have demonstrated with the movement of the nonviolent movement of the 60s, that it works. And I think it might be the only thing, I think it is the only thing that can really resolve the world's problems now.
Bernard?
Yes. I agree with everything that's been said. My comments will be brief. If you want to have an understanding of where I am and what I'm doing, it's www. American Profile. It's an article that was done in American Profile, and it's very succinct. And it lays out exactly what I've been doing, since we've been involved in the movement here. And the two other things. One is for the youth. If we are going, see, one thing is talk about what needs to happen. The question is how. One of the things that we have to do is put nonviolence in every school curriculum. Okay? And democracy is the political expression of nonviolence. So therefore, we can reduce the violence in the schools among the children, which is a very critical problem. Kids shooting each other in schools. It's not safe anymore, okay? And we're not talking about black kids and ghetto kids. We're talking about folks in rural areas and other places. And we got to be serious about that. We spend our money, all right, incarcerating the youth. We can deal with this in a more economical way if we would invest our money in a different way. We got to understand why people do this kind of thing. And we have to then fill the gaps. The other thing, you can't allow all these people to get out of jail, by the way, without any nonviolent training. Because if they go in, get out with no more than what they had when they went in, they'll be back. All right, so you can just reduce the sentences and just wave at them. You understand what I mean? All right, that won't work. All right, so that does not make sense. all right? You've got to have courses in prison to help people learn how to behave differently and to deal with their problems. What they're saying when they go to jail is, I don't know how to deal with my problems.
That's right.
Because when you're in jail, you only make, as I point out, 7 decisions a day. And then you let them out of jail where they got to make 23. They rush back to jail, especially if they got a toothache, because there's no health plan for ex-convicts. And you wonder why folks want to get back in jail? They got to have a kidney transplant. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now, let me just say this. You need courses in every school teaching nonviolence, and as Diane and the rest of them talk about citizenship, why not have a youth legislature from age 12 to 17 where young people learn how to participate in government, where they vote on the same issues that our legislature votes on, okay? And they learn how to use the machines, all right? Age 12. You wonder why the kids don't get involved in elections and stuff like that and such low turnout. They haven't been trained to do it. They don't understand the connection between their participation in government. But one thing, you're not going to let them jump in no car and start driving without having some driver's lessons. So what makes you think the age of 18 is a magical age when all of a sudden they're going to become politically aware and great citizens and participate in government? No. Doesn't work that way. And why is it that we're so intelligent and don't understand that? Final thing, we need to institutionalize nonviolence. We need in Nashville an institution where people train leadership. That's why we were successful in the movement.
That's right.
There were a lot of movements that went on. Every one of those movements where you had a successful outcome, you had folks who had been trained in Nashville.
That's true, everyone.
Including the last one that Martin Luther King had in Memphis. Who do you think was standing downstairs on the parking lot? Jim Bevel? Who do you think was in a plane going to Washington to open up the Poor People's Campaign Office? Lafayette?
Yep.
Every one of those movements. Do you know that more people was on Martin Luther King's executive staff from Nashville than any other place? 1, 2, 3, 4. Go right down the line.
And he on the board.
Exactly. Okay? Memphis, Tennessee? Who do you think gave leadership to organizing the sanitation workers strike? Who do you think invited Martin Luther King in? Across the board. Chicago? Go back down the list. Okay? So my point is, you have a Mecca. Nashville is a West Point for nonviolence. We need to institutionalize that and help train the rest of the nation and the leaders on how you bring about nonviolent social change.
We should do that.
We heard your part. Jim Lawson.
As far as having president.
Well, I agree with much that has been said. What Diane has said, what Bernard has said are all extremely important points. But I think at the same moment that we are too optimistic. I don't know if we recognize what we are up against. Because the year 2004, you have in the United States, well, let me say it another way. The racism, the resistance to desegregation did begin to reorganize itself in the early 1960s while the movement was going on. And in some of that literature, they said, in 30 years, our agenda is going to be the political agenda in the United States. William Buckley said that. Now, they have shipped something, various foundations have shipped some $79 billion. That was as of a report a year ago now, yes, a year ago, $79 billion have gone into certain, they say they're conservative, but I maintain they're Dixiecrat think tanks. Because it's the old racism that has gotten itself sophisticated and has then created all kinds of octopus tentacles across the society to persuade people that the direction of liberty, equality, justice that direction means increasing the tyranny in America. What do you do with the fact that since 1980, 2 million young, poor people of color are in prisons? Most of them for charges that their comparable white people are not in prison for.
That's exactly right.
That is a form of slavery that will not die. It is a form of racism that is not here obvious in the signs, but if you follow our land, our nation, you see that is an invidious way of white supremacy prevailing, of ending. And it's the young, because it's the young who always cause revolutionary change. I mean, who's caused the change in music in America? Even in our churches, not been, people of my generation. It's been the young folk. Because movement for change always comes out of the energy of the young. So, that's an issue. So I have concluded personally from my continued lecturing, study, preaching, teaching, reading, talking, that racism is more pervasive today than ever before. So is sexism more pervasive than ever before. So is violence more pervasive than ever before. And these three things teach a spirituality. They teach a spirituality about what life is and what it means to be a man or a woman that is destructive of the gift of life. So I think we have to deal with what we're becoming. Martin and King and I had a series of conversations in '67 about the status of the movement and the status of our struggle and what we needed to do. And these were private, confidential conversations that he and I had, most of them face-to-face, especially in the last 7 or 8 months of '67, up through December, in fact. And then, I won't go on that way, but the thing that we agreed upon was this, that much of the wonder of the change that has occurred, and had occurred, is surface change, cosmetic, but that the structures of how budgets are formed, the structures of institutions, the structures of the unemployment levels for the poor and people of color, the structures of not wanting quality education for every child all across this country have basically remained the same. And we said to each other that in '68 we need to give serious time as to how the movement had to reorganize if we were to go after those structures that needed changing. I feel that no matter the fact, massive change in, no doubt in Troy, also in Massillon, Ohio, one can go anywhere he wants to now in Massillon, Ohio. So the apartheid system all across the country has been transformed. The possibilities of groups like this gathering all across the country has occurred. It's available. But the issue for me is that public policy and public practice in various ways in the last few years have increased the numbers of poor, increased the numbers of children who don't have a chance, have increased the numbers of hunger. I've seen this as one who's fed the hungry since 1947. I've seen this in Los Angeles, dramatically so, that I could talk about. And then the worst thing about it is that while John Lewis is a blessing, and there are others of this kind in the political arena, we have no national leadership for quality education everywhere in the United States for every child. We have no national leadership, business, political, religious, that is for the notion that health care is a human right and ought to be available to everyone. We have no national leadership that says we are a violent society and we must disarm ourselves spiritually and physically. That a society that spends $800 billion for military purposes, covert and otherwise, is a society that's already flirting with disaster. We have no leadership to say that. We have no national leadership that is saying that racism and sexism and violence are anathema to human life, and that we must begin to examine what this is all about and begin the process of reversing them. That is not going on. And I think, therefore, what that means is that the future is going to see more disaster. I don't believe the disaster will be ultimately victorious, but I think the future is going to see more chaos and more disaster and more hurt and brokenness in these shores of the United States before maybe the necessary revolution stuff begins to emerge and moves us to another direction. I hope to God that I'm absolutely wrong and misled.
But you know you're not.
So I have dread, I have fear, I have dread for the future. Though I'm not going to turn around.
John,
I know that.
Jim had his hand up first. Jim Bevel wanted to say something, and I'll come right back to you. Is that all right?
You wrap up, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe not. You're the moderator.
I want to respond to that, Jim. See, Jesus discovered something when he was being crucified, which has to do with the science of government. He discovered that when he said, "Father, forgive them," that he was not dealing with a proactive ill intent, that he was dealing with a retroactive negative event.
Repeat that.
That what Jesus discovered when he was being crucified was that he was not dealing with a proactive ill intent. He was dealing with a retroactive negative event, which meant that if you put the problem into sociological science, particularly in America, you have the means to solve that problem. In other words, let's take the Wright brothers. These guys was walking around talking, and they said, well, you know, if we was half as intelligent as buzzards, we could fly. Now, they didn't get caught up in how mean gravity was and all that stuff. They simply worked with two fundamental principles. One is the thrust and the drag and lift and gravity. They said, we can solve these problems, then we can fly. Listen to this principle, and this is a principle, and you can see it reflected in us as African Americans. For some reason, I want y'all to hear me very carefully. African males cannot hear their European fathers, while the European sons can. Let me give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. The European father come and say, to secure your life, governments are instituted among men. European sons hear that, go right out, and across this continent, they put in place 3,500 sovereign county governments. You cannot develop your mind. You cannot develop language. You cannot develop science unless you yourself institute government. So the problem then is We have to go deeper than the European fathers and say, okay, as your son, I'm a European, you can see I'm a European son,
Yeah.
that governments are not built on military force, but on marital fidelity. So, we then have to put precinct governments very deep into the community in terms of precinct governmental councils, so that all of the people are participating on a daily basis in the developmental process. So I'm not, Jim, I'm not optimistic. I'm no more optimistic about solving the problems in America than I was about the question of the right to vote. If you have a science, the question then becomes integrity and application. If you have a science. Now, I told you in the 60s, we simply learned through faith. Now we have a science. We can perfect the American Revolution. In other words, we can clean up murder on the planet now. That's where we are now. We can put government in. We can put education in. There's no opposition. There is no enemy. Bush is not the enemy. Bush is asleep. I mean, he's not a problem. I mean, I'm serious. Let me give you no illustration. And all y'all knew the man was lying when he was telling this line. He going somewhere to get some dangerous weapons, and I think they found what a donkey cart with a firecracker on it or something like that. That's all he found. But everybody know the man was lying. He's not the problem. The fact that you go along with his lies and act like that's the problem. So what we have to do, that's why I say I don't even get into these people. Let's, as the American people, as the American citizens, we worked in the 60s because we worked every night. We had meetings every night. We met all the time. We worked on problems. And we did not get caught up in hating people and all this crazy stuff. We stayed focused on solving the problem. Let's go back to what Bernard said. We all in here know that no high school in America educate children. We know that, but we have not addressed that. None. We do not turn our children out economically independent and institutions out. We know it's ridiculous to put gambling in and take science out of schools. We know it's ridiculous to send your industry to foreign countries. That's a citizen's problem. So I'm challenging all of you to come back to class. Now, there's a lot to be learned from the 60s, and most of you never studied the 60s. But it is as important to study the dynamics of the 60s as it was to study the dynamics of 1776. You have to understand the American Revolution. And so I'm not optimistic, Jim. I'm simply saying no. As American citizens, we have the authority to perfect our nation. And then we need to take that serious and be as serious about perfecting American as the aviation is about perfecting airplanes. And if we take it that serious, we will be just as successful. Thank you.
John,
John, the only thing I wanted to say to my teacher and to my brother, to my friend Jim Lawson, he said maybe we are too optimistic, maybe we are too hopeful. But when he taught us the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, he taught us to be hopeful. He taught us to be optimistic. If you believe, don't Jim, don't do that.
Did he teach us something you believe?
No. But if you believe in something, if you believe in the beloved community, if you believe in building the beloved community, if you believe in redeeming the soul of America and saving America, then you must become part of that process.
That's why I continue to work.
That's why I continue to work.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I continue to be in motion.
Yeah.
The problem right now,
Yeah.
we are too quiet.
Yes,
We
that's true.
are too quiet. The burden is on all of us.
Yeah.
We need to make some noise. We need to push. Dr. King used to say, we don't wait on those in a high position to say yes.
Yeah.
We create the climate. They may have a desire to say no, but we create the climate. We create the environment to get people to say yes. And another thing, Jim, you taught us, sir.
Go ahead.
That our struggle was not a struggle that lasts for one day.
Oh, yeah,
Or 1
that's right.
week. Or 1 year.
One generation.
Or 1 generation.
That's right.
It is a struggle of a lifetime.
That's right.
So we must continue to struggle.
Absolutely.
We do what we can. And the
I
next
agree.
generation
Yeah.
come along and struggle.
That's right.
So it's no time to give up.
Don't misunderstand me.
Don't say give up.
Don't misunderstand me now, John Lewis.
Get it back in the movement, John.
John Lewis.
Hi, John.
I should just say, one of the places where I've worked the last 10 years and that I continue to work is in the fact that I know that there are a minimum of 30 million people in our society who live in poverty but who work every day.
That's it.
That 1 out of 4 children are in a home where there is a working adult but they live in poverty.
That's exactly right.
Therefore, in terms of economic life, I work with the Living Wage Movement. I'm organizing there. We're in over 120 some cities now, some of us with staff, organizing almost every day. I am convinced that the governors and the president and the Congress could abolish almost 1/2 of the structural poverty in the United States today if they insisted that through a combination maybe of business and government, no working person is going to have an income of less than that which is necessary for that working person to sustain themselves, their families, their children, and to influence their own environment. It is structural poverty. Now, you have the voices in the United States saying, no, people who are poor are immoral, they're lazy, they don't care, and that is nothing but a downright lie about a whole segment of people, and it's a lie that grew out of slavery, where the slaves working hard every day for nothing, nevertheless, it was written in the books and the literature and the spirituality of slavery for 250 years. Oh, the slaves are lazy.
Yep.
Those folk from Africa don't care. You see them out there in the field loafing. Well, in Louisiana, a slave in the sugar fields lasted a lifetime of 7 years. I mean, just read this stuff. The work was so hard. Now, all I'm saying is that I'm not going to stop working, period, and I'm not going to stop teaching and struggling. And so my statement is not a statement about my giving up. There ain't no chance of that, period, you see. But in any case, I'm still saving the world, because one of the steps of nonviolence is to be sure that you've studied and investigated and hammered out the situation in a fashion so that you know what the problem is you're working on and may know it better than the opponent. And we did that here. I mean, this wasn't just nonviolent teaching. We knew more about the problem of desegregating the lunch counters, of desegregating downtown Nashville, than did the merchants or the mayor or the police or the newspapers or anybody else, so that we could become the agents for the change that was necessary. And
Jim, as you speak, we're working on that.
Yeah.
This program was initially scheduled for 90 minutes.
Oh,
And I will tell those of you who are here who didn't know it was going on for 3 hours, I knew it. I have loved every moment of it. I will tell you, this city and this region and this country
That's right.
are indebted to them for their courage and their candor in the past. And it is a great privilege to them that after 45 years they are still determined to change this society. And now we're going to have the music. Go ahead. Have that.
once we got the message,
Yeah.
put it in,
Come in, Rip.
Come on, John, you have to get into somewhere.
Not gonna sing no
I
dog.
guess since we're the
people, only ones in our generation. No, I mean, CT's in our generation too.
We got them voices here. We need to turn it off. We got it turned off.
We shall overcome. shall